this is Roger Green, host of the Surfing the Mass Tsunami podcast. This weekend, we are offering 5 conversations from episode 17, our preview of the EASL Congress 2024, plus from the vault, one of the conversations from the preview for EASL Congress 2023. Before starting, I want to note this is one of the, I think, most interesting and exciting episodes we've done in a long time, and I hope my descriptions reflect that. You're going to want to hear all of this. This conversation starts when Jörn Schattenberg joins the episode. The main points here are 2 abstracts, one reviewed by Jörn and the other by Aleksander Krag. Jörn actually joined as Hannes was finishing discussing his abstract described in Conversation 2. I asked Michelle to look for an abstract on which Jörn was author. While she's doing so, he discusses a panel Hannes will chair on the future of hepatology, at which Jörn will speak about artificial intelligence. Hannes and Jörn share their excitement about a session that looks to take a peek into the future, framing it in the context of the EASL mission. The abstract Michelle selects for Jörn is titled The Cause of Death, Mortality Rates, and the Role of Sociodemographic Risk Factors and Biomarkers in Metabolic Dysfunction-associated steatohepatitis in more than 18,000 real-world patients from the United States. This continues the theme with the other abstracts of large multi-cohort-centered data sets. Jörn shares their enthusiasm for large sets, notes that real-world data presents a better set of patients than those who make their way into a tertiary care clinic, and notes that this one, obtained through the Optum Health Registry, has produced results that confirm some of the things that we've been observing earlier, but because there's a lot more data with far greater clarity. I then asked the panel each to discuss one of their own abstracts. Aleksander Krag describes a Galaxy Consortium database of 900 patients with a range of steatotic liver disease severity. This, and I quote, true multi-omics, unquote, study incorporated 18 layers of omics and also host genetic factors. He describes the immense analytical needs for a data set with 900 cases and 18 layers of omics as saying that it created 10 to the 11th power data that needed to be analyzed and required, as he put it, the whole computer house to do. In the end, the data set identified 500 highly significant variables. Jörn Schattenberg said 2 things. First, he noted that while the data is extremely complex, it reaffirms the value of some of the pathways others have been studying. Second, Jörn noted that the challenge is to make it easy, and he did say with 2 easies, to the clinician. To Aleksander, that's the thing. We need to bring studies like these to basic level if they are to become actionable. I comment that in complexity theory, complexity can produce simple results if analysts don't seek too high a level of granularity. And Aleksander sees the solution in creating tools based on host genetics, which are stable for life and which everybody has. This episode left me extremely jazzed about Milan and EASL Congress 2024. Each discussion crackles with energy, enthusiasm, and insight. You'll want to listen a lot. I'm probably going to listen to each one at least 2 times. So just sit back, listen, enjoy, learn. And when you're done, join the discussions, our LinkedIn discussion group. Okay, Michelle, now for full guest podcaster credit, let's see if we can do this one. So Jörn has just joined us. Do you happen to have one of the 75 that Jörn is on, or is that too much to ask for?
Yeah.
Michelle Long.
I'm sure.
75, what? So good evening. Hello, thanks.
So Jörn, to bring you back a little bit, here's a surprise for you. This is nowhere near the agenda. Michelle mentioned that she found 75 abstracts of real interest. So I invited her to play guest podcaster, and because she mentioned that Aleksander was on one and Hannes was on one, and I invited her to tell them which they were and asked them to talk about it a little bit. Now, I don't know if you have any of Jörn's, and if you don't, that's perfectly understandable. But if somehow it turned out you did.
No, I definitely did. It's just a question of, can I find them in my list here? There were several, actually, with Jörn's name. I like to look out for what he's got going on at all times.
Aleksander Krag.
I think we got Jörn a few times in the late break, and also think in some of the sessions, Jörn.
Jörn Schattenberg.
Yes. So while Michelle is looking, EASL invited me to talk on a session that Hannes Hagström is actually chairing on the future of hepatology, and I'm going to be speaking on the use of AI. So I was challenging ChatGPT today about hepatology and trying to figure out new things and thinking how that could change my practice. And there's a lot more than ChatGPT, obviously, in AI. That should be a fun session, and I believe we have also stellar co-guests, and really looking forward to that session. It's in the Gold Room. That's the big one, Hannes, right?
Hannes Hagström.
I think so. I haven't been to this particular conference, but gold is always big, right?
So, Aleksander, how big is gold?
It would be a massive attraction, guys. So.
But I'm really looking forward to this session as well. We're sort of trying to talk a little bit about, what do we think the field will look like in about 5 years? Where will we be? But also, what do we need to do to get there? You were talking about vision and mission before, Aleksander, and this is like trying to peek a little bit into the future to see what can these ideas give and lead to in the future, and what do we need to do? So I think the days are over when we can sit on our chamber and do retrospective studies. So we really need to collaborate and help each other.
So I'm hoping Michelle now has her Jörn abstract. Go ahead.
Yes, I do. I found the one that caught my eye of, I think, maybe the at least 5 or 6 that I saw in here from you, Jörn, but this was the causes of death, mortality rates, and the role of sociodemographic risk factors and biomarkers in metabolic dysfunction-associated steatohepatitis, mortality in more than 18,000 real-world patients from the United States. So talk about, big data pulling it together and getting some really cool insights.
Yes. So that was target NASH and some additional biobanks we've explored. And of course, I think the real-world data is really important because all the patients I'm seeing are so highly selected that it's difficult to extrapolate to the true events in the population. So I think these type of approaches where a group of co-authors and colleagues use this from the Optum healthcare registry is something where we're going to gain more information on. And it's a poster presentation on Friday. So things that came out were like cause of mortality, the mortality rate, and we saw, for example, that EGFR decrease was associated with that. So you can get some linked data. I know Hannes has been looking at these things in the databases he has available, and here the Optum electronic healthcare records were explored and gave us some very nice insights, looking at genetics aspects, among others.
Fantastic. So now that Michelle has done my job, I'm going to go back to the agenda and ask each of you to do yours, which is I asked each of you to come prepared to talk about something you were presenting or your group was presenting at the meeting. And you can't go back to what Michelle just asked about. That's too easy. So if that was what you're prepared to talk about, you got to come up with something else. But brave one, go first. What are you presenting here that our audience will find interesting?
So we got a nice work, I think, on Friday afternoon in the microbiome section, actually. But we did in the Galaxy Consortium, had almost 900 people. It's a big Horizon 2020 consortium. 900 people with steatotic liver disease across the spectrum. But what we did for the first time was true multi-omics analysis. So we have 18 layers of omics, means anything from genetics to proteomics to lipidomics, but also, so that's the host factors. And then we got the microbiome factors, metagenomics, metatranscriptomics, lipidomics, as a mass spec also of fecal. So a massive way of understanding patients across the natural history and discovered more than 800 features, of which I think almost 500 were highly significant, associated with different parts of the disease. So that opened sort of a new box to, if you unleash the power of omics, a new box to what potential biomarkers come out for the next generation. So that has taken us quite a while to get there. So I'm a bit excited to see how that. It's not the easiest way to communicate, actually, if you've got a wealth of data that is so massive, and yet also trying to integrate this, because then you can basically try to understand diseases as a systemic wide level. So we don't just go to one thing, but you actually link it all the way down to genes, activated genes, and microRNAs, whatever regulates things, all the way down to a protein or metabolite that is associated with disease and disease activity. And all these patients also were having phenotyping, including liver biopsies, etc. So that's kind of opening to a new world for biomarkers. So that's.
So I have a question for you. That paper sounds tremendously ambitious in scope. 500 significant variables. A statistician, my head starts to spin.
Yeah, you cannot do that. It is bioinformatics. It is really complicated to do that. And again, if you multiply 900 patients, and each patient, if you do whole genome sequencing for just the host, and then you have similar for the gut, etc. So yeah, this takes a whole computer house to manage. This is 10 to the 11th data in that study alone. So that's a lot.
Okay, my head is spinning. So are you able to get that down to the idea that goes, you can only make 3 points in 20 minutes? Were you able to get it down to 3 things? Or
I pushed one of my fellows to do it, and I think she's trying to explain that this is actually a wealth of resources of what people can then potentially pick out and try to use. But there are many features that that changes increases with disease severity, but there are also many that decreases. And again, the next frontier in biomarkers is not diagnostic prognostics. That's how we monitor it, but also see how do we non-invasively best assess treatment effects. And some of these things we will need, and how can we transform the clinical endpoint from histology-driven to based on non-invasive biomarkers. And I think that story is by far ended yet. So there will be some more to look into here.
Aleksander, I just scanned the abstract too, and I think it very nicely, with your group and the depth of the whole consortium, it repaints the pictures we kind of looking at the mechanistic level. Also, you identified interleukin 8, I believe, and some TGF I was seeing in the abstract. So the complexity of the data increases, but we're still looking at some of the same pathways we've been studying. It's nice to see that this is reinforced even by the deeper analysis and levels of data that you're introducing here.
Yeah, some of the cytokines also come on. Today you can relatively relatively easy to measure hundreds of different cytokines and then try to link that. Also link us a little bit to our understanding of the pathophysiology. And then the whole thing is then coming into, so we have the opportunity to also see what is the weight of, let's say, what is driven by the gut, how do you see, what is inflammatory driven, what is linked to the host genetic factors, et cetera, to try to bring it together. But it becomes a little complex. But I guess humans and diseases are a bit complex.
As a physician, I wanted easy answer.
Yeah, that's the thing. We need to bring it. That's then the challenge. We needed to bring it into something that is clinically actionable. And that's where I think the next level of doing the way we do and manage these, we can have complex analysis, but then we have analytical tools basically driven by AI and machine learning to come up with a relatively simple answer, because that's what we want. Shall we treat or not treat the patient, or should we stop or not stop the drug? Does the drug work, yes or no? But I still think we can have complex machinery, but it needs to come up with something that's actionable. That's for next year's abstract, Jörn.
So, Aleksander, one of the things I find interesting about that is I'm a complexity theory buff of sorts. And one of the ideas behind complexity theory is pretty simple. If you think about fractal geometry, for example, if you don't worry about things being identical but only similar, you can find a limited number of patterns that really matter. And it's when we try to get it to perfect that things get complicated, and simplicity and complexity could go together, but complication can't. So when you talk about trying to boil a real complex data set down into a few core themes, you're hitting me kind of right where I live. I think that's just a fantastic effort.
That's what we need. Again, the power of these tools. You can see today, doing a host genetic costs nothing. It's really no issue. The only reason why we're not using it very much is because we don't know how to use it. Mm-hmm. So you can do basically host genetics. Everybody should have that, because that is the only biomarker that is stable for life.
Right.
And that can be used and integrated at any time point. We just need the machinery who can actually at different type level tell you what does it mean. Also see what these polygenic risks for. So you don't need to look in one or two genes. You can look into many of them in combination. That tells a different story.
And now, back to Roger.
We hope you've enjoyed this recording. If you have any questions or comments about the content of this conversation or the entire episode, please put them in the review section of the page from which you downloaded this conversation, or send an email to questions@surfingmesh.com, or send me a note if you're a LinkedIn follower, which many of you are. What we do next week will depend on what's going on in my family life on Monday, but we will have an episode. It will be fantastic, and we look forward to seeing you then. Bye-bye now.